Choulos, the International Business Account Manager with the Sacramento MBDA Export Center, operated by the California Asian Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining the third and last of this webinar series to learn about global contracting opportunities with the Asian Development Bank. Today's focus is on the healthcare sector. I want to thank our hosts, Go-Biz, U.S. Commercial Service, Asian Development Bank, and the CalAsian Chamber of Commerce, Sacramento MBDA Export Center for organizing this series. As we get started, I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded. Also, all participants are muted upon entry, but you are welcome to submit your questions through the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your screen. Participants also have the opportunity to submit questions upon registration, and we've received quite a number, so thank you very much. We will have the Q&A towards the end of the session. And we also want your feedback and appreciate any comments that you want to provide through the chat box, which is also located at the bottom of the screen next to the Q&A box. And lastly, we will be following up with a survey after this event, and we look forward to receiving your feedback and look forward to continuing to provide more valuable services and information and opportunities for you to support your business. So now I am honored to introduce Ambassador Jason M. Chung, who will provide the opening welcome remarks for today's webinar. Ambassador Jason M. Chung serves as the U.S. Executive Director, where he represents the United States on the Board of Directors of the Asian Development Bank. Prior to his appointment, Jason served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Public Affairs. His portfolio included matters related to international affairs, development finance, CFIUS, trade and bilateral relationships between the U.S. Treasury and the Ministries of Finance and other nations. Mr. Chung is a graduate of Trinity College in Connecticut and is married with 2 young children. He resides in Fairfax County, Virginia, and in Manila, Philippines. Welcome, Ambassador Chung.
Thank you, Saori, for the very kind introduction. And it's interesting, I just found out that we live a few miles apart, so it's great to be introduced by a neighbor of mine. I appreciate all of you who are taking time to learn about the Asian Development Bank and all it has to offer companies that are looking for opportunities in Asia. We have plenty of experts from ADB who will elaborate on particular healthcare opportunities for U.S. companies, consultants, and suppliers, and I thank them for their participation, especially Jeff Taylor, who's going to be presenting later on. I think Jeff is a very valuable resource that we have at the bank. Procurement opportunities is an important agenda item for me and one that I focused on since joining the bank and the Executive Director's Office as a deputy over 2 years ago. I want to thank our sponsors, both the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development and the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce for putting this event on. They are keenly aware of the potential of these prospects and how U.S. firms can participate in approximately $30 billion that ADB annually invests across Asia and the Pacific. Along with these 2 valued partners, I want to thank the Sacramento Minority Business Development Agency Export Center and the U.S. Commercial Services Sacramento Export Assistance Center, who helped create this event. While this is the last of this series of events, this is a model of our foreign engagement, and we hope to increase the number of these in the coming months and as well get back to in-person events. Lastly, I want to thank my 2 colleagues from the U.S. Commercial Service who are based in Manila, Mark O'Grady and Michael Maye. They are not only a great resource to me, but can be very valuable to you, and I encourage you to connect with them early and often. Please include them if you decide to bid on ADB projects, because they will be able to shepherd your concerns and your agenda items with ADB as they move forward. With that, I want to thank you for attending, and I appreciate your interest in procurement opportunities with ADB, and I turn it back to the moderator. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Chung. Next, I would like to hand this over to a couple of people to provide additional opening remarks. Maye Saephanh, who is the director of the Sacramento MBDA Export Center, and Max Oltersdorf, Deputy Director for International Affairs and Trade with the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Let's begin with you, Maye.
Thank you, Saori. Really appreciate this opportunity to join you all today. Welcome, everyone. As Saori mentioned, my name is Maye Saephanh, and I am the director of the Sacramento Minority Business Development Agency Export Center. And thank you to Ambassador Chung and the Asian Development Bank for this opportunity to partner with your organization, as well as with the U.S. Commercial Service and the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Our center is thrilled to present this event today in partnership with all of these agencies. As we may have mentioned before, the Sacramento MBDA Export Center is part of a network of centers located throughout the United States. We are one of 4 centers with a particular focus on exporting to Asia Pacific. And we provide a number of technical assistance as well as resources to help minority business enterprises. So you can go to our website at sacramentombda.com and learn more about global business development, business matchmaking, access to capital, access to contracts, as well as other events similar to this one today that we're presenting. And so we partner with various different organizations and trade promotion entities to support business owners in their goals to succeed as exporters. I know you'll gain valuable information from today's webinar event, and we look forward to hearing of your success in exporting and also supporting you. We look forward to also continuing our partnership and working with the Asian Development Bank and the U.S. Commercial Service, as well as the Governor's Office for Business and Economic Development, to continue to further your success in this journey. Thank you again for joining us today. Back to you, Saori.
Appreciate your kind words. How about Max? Let's turn it over to you, Max. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Saori. And yeah, as you mentioned, I'm Max Oltersdorf, Deputy Director for International Affairs and Trade in the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. I want to thank everyone who's attending this third and final of this amazing webinar series put on in conjunction with CalAsian Chamber, U.S. Commercial Service, and of course the Asian Development Bank. As with the topics of the last webinars, California is the world leader in the healthcare space. Our biotech companies produce medicines for people all around the world, and our medical device companies ship their products around the world as well. The healthcare industry has never been more important than it is right now, and we are proud of all the California companies who are leading the way in this space. We hope this webinar focused on healthcare opportunities in Asia can allow for world-leading California businesses to export their products and services to that region. As always, Go-Biz is here to help any California business export. If we can be of service, please reach out. And I want to thank Ambassador Chung again and the other participants for being here to help support California businesses. So with that, I will turn it back over. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Max. Both Maye and Max, really appreciate you being here. So we are very fortunate to have speakers from the Asian Development Bank with deep experience and expertise in their fields. I know you will learn a lot, and I'm excited for you to learn about the contracting opportunities for your business. Mr. Jeffrey Taylor will begin our presentation by providing introductory remarks of the webinar goals and our Asian Development Bank participants. First, allow me to share his brief bio. Jeffrey Taylor is the Director of Procurement, Division 1 of ADB's Procurement, Portfolio, and Financial Management Department. His division covers ADB's portfolio in Central, West, and South Asia. Jeff has been working on the public procurement infrastructure projects for 32 years, the last 12 which has been with ADB. He is a chartered member of the Institute of Purchasing and Supply and holds a Master of Science in Procurement. Welcome, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you very much, Saori, and thank you very much, Edie Chung, Max, Maye, for your support and remarks, and Chung, thank you for the kind words, overstating my importance, but appreciated very much. Firstly, a few points about ADB. Firstly, welcome to this seminar. As some of you may know, ADB has been holding business outreach events on a large scale for the past decade. Primarily, we've been focusing on Manila with a forum for consultants, contractors, manufacturers, suppliers, civil society, interested in providing goods, works and services on ADB projects. As Chung has already mentioned, the opportunities are significant. $30 billion a year of new lending is made by ADB across the region. That predominantly needs to be implemented not by ADB, not by the governments and entities that we lend to, but by contractors, by suppliers, by consultants. So we regard these outreach events as critical to our mission in development, as it is people like you in this audience that actually implement the projects that ADB financed. So thank you very much for your participation. This year, we were planning not to organize an event in Manila, but within the region. We've chosen Uzbekistan in Central West Asia. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, that will have to be postponed for obvious reasons. And we'll start exploring the opportunity to hold a regional event outside of Manila next year. The following year, we'll have a large event in Manila again. But we need to continue these bilateral outreach events as well. It's very important. And really, one of the things that the pandemic has taught us with the work from home arrangements is how to use technology more effectively to reach our audiences. So we're going to continue with that model and scale it up and have more events like these. And thank you very much for organizing this. This is a great opportunity for ADB to engage with such a critical constituency. We're currently working on enhancing our business outreach to provide you better information, and having a conversation with Chung on this as well, on how we provide better procurement statistics and information about what's going on in ADB and what the potential opportunities are. So it's very much a moving picture. We are scaling it up to make it more interactive, the information richer, and so forth. I'm happy to have with us a couple of colleagues who will lead on substantive issues. As a director, of course, I am above that kind of stuff. We have Dr. Dodo and we have Julian Doczi from our procurement team, and Dr. Dodo is from our health team. It's an area ADB has not been particularly large scale in the past, but obviously it's something that we are engaged with our clients on right now. We're scaling up over this year with a significant amount of assistance for health sector related activity. And I expect that to change the paradigm somewhat for ADB. We traditionally were known as the Asian Bank of Dams and Bridges. That was the D and the B. But we're having to move away, quite rightly, from hard infrastructure to look at social infrastructure far more. Particularly, I expect in the coming medium term, 3 to 5 years, to the health sector as well. So this is particularly relevant to this discussion we're having today. So thank you very much. I will now hand over back to you, Saori. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. Okay, so now we are ready to get on with the presentations. There's a lot of information to share, and I know that you're going to learn a lot. So I would like to introduce you to Dr. Eduardo Banzon. He is the Principal Health Specialist in Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department of the Asian Development Bank. He champions universal health coverage and has long provided technical support on UHC to countries in Asia and the Pacific. Before joining ADB, he was the World Health Organization's Regional Advisor for Health Financing for the Eastern Mediterranean region, and WHO Health Economist in Bangladesh, President and CEO of Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, the World Bank Senior Health Specialist for the East Asia and Pacific region, and faculty member of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine and Ateneo Graduate School of Business. So welcome, Dr. Banzon. Quite a background you have and so much for you to share. Really appreciate you being here and look forward to learning.
Thanks, Saori. And good morning, Edie Chung, Jeff, and everyone else. I think it's good afternoon. Okay. Before we talk about what ADB is doing in health, next slide, please. Let's talk about what's happening to health in Asia and the Pacific. And I think one of the messages we would like to say is that the region has actually done great in the last, in the last 50 years. We have seen average life expectancy in the region go up to 70, more than 70 from 46. And a lot of disease-specific programs have actually reduced infectious diseases. And lots of countries have now focused on achieving what we call universal health coverage, or UHC. Next slide. And we go down to the metrics. We have seen some significant reductions on under 5 mortality and maternal mortality. So we're really seeing very much improved health situation in Asia and the Pacific. Next slide. But we have to understand also that even as we're seeing this good story, we're still seeing what we call low spending for health. If we look at the share of health in a number of countries in Asia compared to what they're spending for education, you have countries spending only approximately 3% of their total government spending for health. This is quite, of course, significantly low. Next slide. We're also seeing as Asia rapidly aging, and this is one of the phenomena. One of the things we'd like to say is that for a number of Asian countries, what took us a century to happen for the aging population to increase is happening in about 20-30 years. So we're seeing this rapid aging now, which of course increased the need of your healthcare system, because now you have to manage more chronic condition. Next slides. We're also continuing to see problems on out-of-pocket spending. So if you look at the slide on the left, and this is 50, a significant number of countries in the region, people still have to pay out-of-pocket. They, even as a lot of countries have actually implemented universal health coverage schemes, it has not been able to reduce significantly this household out-of-pocket spending, which means a lot of people are at risk of financial risk whenever they access healthcare services. Next slide, please. And as I said, NCDs has been quite underinvested. This is the global picture, but this global picture is probably quite similar to what we're seeing in Asia and the Pacific. A lot of the spending in health is still a communicable disease. Palliative care is not generally available. Elderly care is not generally available in the region, and access to services for cancer care, complex procedures addressing complications of heart disease are not generally available in a number of countries or parts of countries. Next slide, please. So, this, in a sense, this was what we were seeing in Asia, that the challenges that we need to help our developing member countries is, one, help them achieve UHC, two, help them address non-communicable disease, particularly as the region starts to age. And of course, we always recognize that disease outbreaks, pandemics, was a major threat to economic stability, and that since a number of the disease outbreaks have come out of Asia, that was something we were very much concerned of. So in the ADB Strategy 2030 that defined the priorities of ADB, these were the areas that the ADB committed itself. It committed itself to addressing UHC. It will help countries invest in regional health security to help address the threat of disease outbreaks. It was going to help countries invest in elderly care, in addressing non-communicable disease and all that, and to approach this in a multi-sectoral manner, not just getting the health sector to work on it. Now, all of this was happening, of course, and in a sense, probably just to advance it a bit, before COVID. And in a sense, the next few slides were the priorities that ADB has in the health sector in our 5 regions before COVID happened. And we expect that in a post-COVID world, these priorities will, of course, still be our priorities. So I will discuss these priorities now, and later on, I'll talk about what we have done when COVID and when the pandemic, of course, started affecting Asia, not just the region, but of course, globally. Next slide, please. So where are we? As Jeff said, health is a small operation in the bank. It was only last year that we finally hit 3% of total ADB lending. We're going to the health sector. So I joined the bank late 2014, and I think it was only 0.14% of the total lending of ADB was for health. So for the past few years, we've actually really worked on getting ADB support for health sector operation increase. Of course, this was driven by a change in how ADB viewed health. Prior to 2013, health was seen as the ADB sort of move away from health. In 2013, during the midterm review of our strategy 2020, the commitment to health became part of the midterm reviews recommendation. And of course, when we did the strategy 2030, health is now up front and center, particularly UHC. So we started to scale up the health projects. And if you look at the map right now, we are basically starting to have health projects all over from Central Asia to the Pacific. Next slide, please. So this gives you a snapshot on where we are. From the Pacific, where we're working on vaccines and e-health, and I will discuss that later. In Southeast Asia, where there's a lot of regional health security work, particularly in what we call in the Greater Mekong sub-region. In East Asia, in Mongolia, where we have really long-term engagement with Mongolia and China, with a focus on elderly care in our support for China. In South Asia, where the work is mostly in urban health, but we've started to do some NCD, regional health security work in Sri Lanka. And in Central West Asia, where the focus on maternal child health and what we call integrating health systems, because what happened in Central and West Asia is their health services was very silos. So you have a pediatric hospital, you have a maternity hospital, independent of each other. So we're really working in helping these countries integrate their health delivery system. Plus, of course, we have a private sector, a growing portfolio in our private sector department, which include equity investment in hospitals and investments in lease companies for health and so on. So it's a growing portfolio that we have, in which we do lending direct to private companies or invest in them. Next slide, please. So, as I said, in Southeast Asia, what's the focus? So in both India and Mongolia, we have urban health projects. We have been in Mongolia, in both Bangladesh and India. My apologies. In both Bangladesh and India, we have urban health projects. And in Bangladesh, we have been supporting urban health there for quite some time. So both of these projects are support innovations. The difference is in Bangladesh, we have what we call sort of a project type operation. That means the money goes to government and then they really spend it directly on health. In India, it's a results-based loan. What's in the pipeline? Well, in India, we expect now to have, I think, annually operation projects that will be support. So a new project will be developed for the next Hello, I'm sorry. I think I got lost. I apologies. So this is our operation right now in South Asia. Next slide, please. Okay, in Southeast Asia, so that's about 11 countries. So that's the whole of the ASEAN, from Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and all, and Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Timor-Leste. So we have a range of projects there, but as I earlier said, GMS for us is the Greater Mekong subsystem that includes Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Thailand. So we're working on what we call regional health work. It's the name has changed now. It's going to be more of a healthy borders project, and because part of the reason we want to address this is that people move across these countries quite easily, and when you move around, you most of the time lose your access to health services. So in the Philippines, we are working on a loan that will support universal health coverage. In Myanmar, we are exploring to support NCD treatment with focus on with focus on with focus on cancer care. Next slide, please. In Central West Asia, as I said, the existing projects we have include a couple of projects that's working on how to integrate existing health services in Tajikistan, maternal and child health, the same in Uzbekistan. This integrated perinatal care health expected to be is being developed right now, and would be a follow-up to an existing primary healthcare improvement project. In Armenia, we're looking and doing a follow-up project to this human development enhancements project. So we're basically doing two countries mostly in Central West Asia on health. Next slide. And in the Pacific, what we're doing is that we have long been in PNG, where we have been supporting the rural health systems, and we continue to support that. But we have also started to do regionally 4 Pacific islands to help them access new vaccines on against cervical cancer, diarrhea, rotavirus, and pneumococcal pneumonia. At the same time, we are supporting digital health programs in Tonga and providing advisory service to the region as a whole. So we're starting to grow our portfolio as well in the Pacific. Next slide, please. And finally, in East Asia, we have 2 countries only in East Asia, Mongolia and China, and we have long-term relationships with them. In China, as I said, our focus is on elderly care. We now have 4 projects supporting elderly care innovations, and a 5th one on the pipeline. In Mongolia, we support a whole range of reforms, from hospital reforms, pharmaceutical regulation, health insurance, and so on. So we have extensive engagement in Mongolia. We even support the preparation of the country's national health strategy in Mongolia. Next slide. So what I have just described were essentially what the focus of ADB projects. This was what we were working on. Then COVID happened, and COVID in a sense have changed a lot of things, including our projects in health. Next slide. So when we start ADB, sorry, I probably assumed that this has been discussed before, but ADB has committed to mobilize, or is mobilizing, about $20 billion worth of support to developing member countries to respond to COVID. The support goes in various ways. We have grants and technical assistance, and in particular, the Asia Pacific Disaster Response Fund grant, which provides immediate support to countries. Now, this amount, the grants are usually small amount, maximum of $3 million, and they're usually implemented by the countries. We also provide technical assistance, and this also provides immediate support to the countries. Now, as I said, these grants are usually implemented by the countries, and although it can be delegated to ADB, and is usually used now for personal protective equipment, and in a sense, really immediate needs of the countries. In addition to that, a number of emergency assistance loans and grants have been passed, and I will discuss that later. And finally, we have what we call sort of counter-cyclical policy response option loans, CIPRO. Okay, and basically these are policy loans. That means the money goes to the government directly to the Ministry of Finance to support the implementation of government response strategies. So it does not just support health; it also supports other interventions outside of the health sector, which includes social protection, which include making sure that addressing some of the economic impact of COVID-19. On health, a lot of the countries usually have strategies on improving health infrastructure, getting more staff involved, and funding their health insurance to respond to COVID and so on. But in this case, usually the money goes to finance and it goes to the government funds flow. So it's really if the government wants to use this money and engage the private sector, it has to go to government. Next slide. Where are CIPROs? So these are the different. So we have basically ADB is basically approved and in the process of committing CIPROs in all over the region. There's about 6 now in Central West Asia, Mongolia. In the Pacific, about 4, 5 in South Asia, and in Southeast Asia, 5. So a lot of our developing member countries have gotten CIPRO projects or projects that are the nature of CIPRO to support their respective national COVID-19 response strategies. Next slide, please. For the emergency assistance loans, so and other health sectors loans, so it's not just these new loans that grants that we've been using to support DMCs. There's been what we call repurposing. So in a number of countries where there are existing projects, Bangladesh, Mongolia, Uzbekistan, as part of the loan money has been used to respond to COVID-19. So for example, in Uzbekistan, I think 18 million was used to repurpose to procure ventilators in order to build up their critical care capacity. And I think similarly in Bangladesh, part of the loan on urban health was also used to rapidly procure PPE. So this was really, so this provided ADB the flexibility to immediately support the DMCs. Now the new loans that has been approved includes projects in Mongolia, in Central West Asia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kyrgyz, and Uzbekistan, in Bangladesh, and in Philippines, which was just approved yesterday or Monday, and in Laos, PDR. So these are project loans. That means the money is going to be specifically contracted, bidded out by the government to procure much needed COVID-19 interventions. And this is the procurement would be managed by the countries. Next slide. Finally, among the technical assistance, there are a number of country-level technical assistance, but I think but more than that, and this is for those who provide consulting services, there are a number of what we call region-wide TAs, which are providing support across a number of countries. This includes the one that we're managing out of my department, the SDCC, the Sustainable Development Climate Change Department. Then we have one in Southeast Asia, Pacific, South Asia, and Central Asia. So this TAs usually looks for consultings first or individual consultants to implement the outputs of the TA. Next slide. And an example for that, and this is for the Central Asia, is that, for example, the Central Asia TA is actually in the process now. I think these are the deadlines. I don't know whether this has moved. Looking for a couple of firms on digital health, 1 and 2, please forget number 3, to support Central Asia, and the second is a health security and health system strengthening firm also to work on Central Asia. So I think I'll end there. Thank you, Saori.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banzon. Really helpful information. Got a great overview of, what is happening in the space, those opportunities and the priorities. And, one thing I found, important that you addressed was the need for collaboration across sectors, and healthcare is certainly a very complex matter, and to address the complexity, there's a need for that cross-sector collaboration that will result in innovation and better solutions. So thank you very much. And just as a reminder for the audience, the participants, that you are welcome to add any questions that you have into the Q&A box. We will be monitoring them and asking your questions towards the end of the webinar. And also feel free to provide any comments in the chat. So our next presenter is Mr. Julian Doczi, and he's going to provide us a great overview in regards to that procurement process. So Mr. Doczi is a procurement specialist in ADB's Procurement Portfolio and Financial Management Department. He has over 10 years of experience in his career spanning procurement, anti-corruption, water management, and climate change, including nearly 4 years with ADB. So prior to ADB, he worked in the UK with a development consulting firm and a research think tank. He is a Canadian with a Master's of Science degree in climate change and international development. Also has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Sciences and has membership in the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. Welcome, Mr. Doczi.
Thank you very much, Saori, and the organizers for having me at this business opportunities session this morning. Can I just check that you hear me all right and see me all right, Saori?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you. If my mic cuts out at some point, just let me know, because that tends to
great.
So yeah, my presentation to you all this morning for the next 30 or so minutes will be about ADB's general operations, general procurement framework, and how you go about, as an interested supplier of goods, works, or services in the health sector, how you go about winning contracts with ADB or cooperating or partnering with ADB for some of the projects that Dr. Banzon may have mentioned in his presentation. We'll also spend a bit of time at the end talking about the website and how you can access some of these opportunities. Next slide, please. So this session will be, an overview of ADB's operations, business opportunities, procurement framework, and what we can call bidding strategies or opportunities for working with ADB. Next slide, please. So the first section, I'll talk to you just a couple of minutes on if you're not too familiar with ADB and its operations, some general statistics about our recent operations and how we operate as a bank. Next slide, please. So if you haven't worked too much with ADB in the past, or you need a refresher, essentially we're a development bank, and in 2018 our total operations were around 36 billion. That's even increased a bit further in 2019 with an uncontracted portfolio of lending to sovereign and non-sovereign partners in the Asia Pacific region of around 30 billion. So really what that means for you is 30 billion of project opportunities for which your firm may be interested to bid. Not all of those, of course, will be in goods and works and services. Some of this is policy support or other types of program assistance, but nonetheless a large portfolio and pipeline of opportunities there in the Asia Pacific region, which spans from as far west as Azerbaijan all the way as far east as Vanuatu or the Pacific Islands. So, you know, a large region of the world with most of its population where ADB is active, lending and awarding grants to government and non-sovereign private sector entities to further its mission of development objectives in the region. So we do that through loans, grants, also equity investments and guarantees, with our own funds and also with partner funds. Next slide, please. Our total portfolio is over 100 billion at this point of active loans and grants. And in 2018, we awarded over 4,000 individual contracts for goods and civil works through mostly our government partners. And we, to the tune of about 13 billion. And consulting services, we awarded around 5,000 contracts to the tune of around 700 or 800 million. Again, these are 2018 data, but the numbers have gone up slightly in 2019 as well. Next slide, please. So as Eduardo mentioned, health sector has historically been a relatively small area of ADB's total portfolio. He mentioned in 2019, now the number has ticked up to about 3%. In 2018, it was around 2%. You can see the breakdown here of the other sectors. We are still sort of largely from share of the portfolio, as Jeff mentioned, Asia, dam and bridge, transport, energy, water, and the like. But there is a strong imperative in our new corporate strategy, Strategy 2030, to expand our operations in the social sectors, education and health in particular. So you will see these numbers growing in health and education as a share of the portfolio in years ahead. And as we all know, growing numbers means opportunities for firms like yourselves. Next slide, please. Across the region, you can see the rough breakdown of our portfolio in terms of how we within ADB internally subdivide the Asia Pacific region by operational department. South Asia and Central West Asia, as you can see, comprising the majority of our portfolio, but a substantial amount also in Southeast and East Asia. Not to discount the Pacific though, where although the numbers are small, we are in constant need of good firms and good bidders for some of the very complex projects and challenges that region faces as a dispersed small islands and fragile. So that's also close to my heart because I cover Pacific transactions in the procurement department. So don't be put off by the small total number there. We're always interested in getting more bidders and more market interest in the Pacific in particular. Next slide, please. Here you can see who our main borrowers are in 2018. These were India, Bangladesh, PRC, Philippines, and Indonesia. This goes up and down by year, but also includes Pakistan, occasionally Vietnam, or some of the other Southeast Asian member states as well. But generally speaking, the majority of our lending is happening in these 5 or 6 sort of member states where the majority of projects are being implemented. Not to say that there aren't opportunities in every other member state, because there are, but the overall size of the portfolio in these top member countries is obviously therefore where the main and majority of opportunities lie. So we do have 46 member countries with whom we deliver projects within this region, and we work with private sector to do so, like firms like yourselves in the various energy, health, water sectors, etc. But we also work with NGOs, civil society organizations. So if you happen to be an NGO, we're happy to have a conversation about partnering, about a knowledge partnership, or even at NGOs competing for consulting assignments is also possible. We work with foundations and academia and other of the multilateral and bilateral donors as well to deliver our mandate. Next slide, please. Just to give you a quick heads up on, the ADB project cycle as well, if you're not too familiar with how we deliver projects. So it starts at the country partnership strategy stage, where ADB will meet with the country involved and say, we want to focus on these priorities with you over the next, say, 5 years. These kinds of investment pipelines in, say, the agriculture sector, the health sector, and the energy sector. Then over the 5-year period, individual projects get prepared coming out of that pipeline. They each get approved and each get implemented. and evaluated. So that's the rough, broad project cycle. And later I will also show you how our procurement cycle fits into this project cycle as well. Next slide, please. So now I'll spend a few minutes just telling you about the general nature of ADB's business opportunities and what you can expect from us there. Next slide, please. So in case you may wonder why you would like to pursue an ADB finance contract, you know, ADB is one of many donors, one of many potential clients in the market. Why work with us and not with the World Bank or with you know, one of the bilateral agencies or just with the private sector? What you can benefit from ADB is first, I think, and most, you know, of interest to a lot of firms in say the US and Europe and Canada, is exposure to the very dynamic Asia Pacific region. ADB can be a good entry point if your firm is trying to establish more of a footprint, more of a market presence in Asia Pacific, working with a trusted development partner on sort of assignments where you have a strong and fair procurement process, good integrity oversight, you know, good contract management can allow you to get a taste of the Asia Pacific region while still working with a strong partner, so that you can understand more of the political and social dynamics of the region, but in a relatively safe way. Then, you know, after your ADB experience, you could branch out to sort of more what we can say risky clients or risky ventures. ADB being a relatively sort of safe bet as your first foray into the region. Of course, our financing is generally assured. So, you know, if we sign a contract with you, you'll generally get paid provided you perform. And, you know, our operations are still growing rapidly in the region. There's a major infrastructure deficit in the Asia Pacific, as there is around the world and in the rest of Africa and Latin America as well. And, you know, there's a strong financing need to fill that gap. So ADB does its best to fill that gap with its loans and grants, but even still, we have our other development partners such as AIIB, who has emerged and who we work with as well, who also help to fill that gap. And so, you know, there's plenty of work involved and plenty of room for all. But with ADB, you have a over 50 year established history of work in the region, strong partnerships network. So, you know, you can be assured that when you bid with us, you'll be getting a strong organizational partner and good experience there. Next slide, please. So what types of opportunities are actually on offer? So you may be a supplier of goods, in which case you could supply our projects, say with ventilators, for example, in the COVID context, or medical supplies, or you may be a works contractor, in which case you could, for example, help to construct hospitals or community health centers, or, you know, these types of, you know, cold, you could think about, you know, maybe more towards goods, but, you know, cold supply chains, storage and transport of vaccines. All of these sorts of things are some of the goods and works opportunities that may be available to you through ADB projects, in addition to what Dr. Banzon mentioned in his presentation. We have turnkey contracts where perhaps that might be applicable for the construction, design and construction, say, of an entire hospital complex. And then, you know, services, consulting services and what we call non-consulting services. The difference just being in the level of intellectual inputs involved. So project preparation or, you know, policy advice or vocational training, you know, medical training, these kinds of services we often engage through our projects, and you may be interested to bid for or be available to compete for these types of goods, works, or services. Next slide, please. I'll just run through quickly now, just to give you a flavor of who some of our top suppliers have been. But of course, as we know in the stock markets, the past is not an indicator of the future. So, you know, this is the past, but you can make it the future by competing and by winning and change these statistics in favor of the US or wherever you happen to be from going forward. So goods, we see a strong presence in PRC and South Asian firms. Next slide, please. Works, again, PRC and Indian firms tend to win a lot of work from ADB in the past. Next slide, please. Services, we see more of a dominance of Korean, but also some presence of the UK, France, and Australia there. Next slide, please. And just to name these suppliers so you can see a bit more about them, you could also think about reaching out to them for partnerships, since these are experienced ADB suppliers and they know the drill. So for example, you could ask them to be a subcontractor or form a joint venture with them to help get your foot in the door. If you don't have experience with us yet, subcontracting or joint venturing can be a good way, with a more experienced firm, can be a good way to start. So here we see, again, suppliers of goods. Next slide, please. Works, you can see some of the big names there and the amount of contracts they've won over the last couple of years. And next slide, please. And services, there you see as well some of the big names that I'm sure you're familiar with. Next slide, please. Here, I just wanted to show you a breakdown of what the US has contributed to ADB in terms of goods and services. This is taken from the URL you see in the bottom corner. It's a lot of detail on the slide, but just for your reference, you can see which firms from the US have been most involved in ADB procurement. And again, you may consider reaching out to them for partnerships or joint ventures going forward. Next slide, please. Now I'll just spend a couple of minutes telling you about how ADB procures, the sort of the policy and guidelines we have in place to ensure, you know, that the process is fair and equitable, you know, transparent to all involved, so that, you know, as a public sector agency, we need to spend, you know, our money, which is ultimately taxpayer money from our 68 member countries, in a fair and transparent way. So we do this through our procurement policy and relevant procurement guidelines. Next slide, please. So we actually have 2 active procurement frameworks right now. So if you bid for assignments, you may encounter assignments still working under the old framework or under the new framework. We had a new framework approved and released in 2017. And so newer projects, those approved essentially after 2017, will be using the new framework, what we call the policy and regulations. Whereas old projects that are active, that are that were approved before 2017, but are still active, because the average age of an infrastructure project, you know, maybe 8 to 10 years. So if we will still be having projects for the next several years under the old framework, there you will be following the old framework. So what's the difference? The difference is that the old framework was very rules-based. It was very one-size-fits-all. Whereas the new framework moves more toward a principle-based approach to procurement. And what that means is that project teams and procurement teams have more flexibility in designing requests for proposals or invitations to tender that are fit for the market. We undertake more upfront market research to understand the need in terms of how to design procurement packages under the project. And we're more involved at the back end in terms of contract management and implementation support as well. So essentially, it's a move toward a more responsive and flexible way of procuring, which doesn't compromise fairness and transparency, but moves away from, say, arbitrary thresholds. Like if it's 100,000, you have, if it's above 100,000, you can't do limited bidding, for example. But there may be a perfectly justifiable reason why a package of 200,000 should be bid on a limited basis, right? So moving away from some of these rules towards more of a principles-based approach is the intent of this policy. Next slide, please. We have 6 core procurement principles: fairness, economy, efficiency, transparency, and under the new framework, this also includes quality and value for money. So we try to ensure all of our procurement activities, even if it's a direct contract, follow these principles. And so if it is, for example, a direct contract, it should be because it's the most economic and efficient way of delivering the need. Because obviously then it would come at the expense, for example, of open competition. But generally speaking, ADB favors open competition. Open competition is the sort of default choice in ADB. And so that means the majority of our procurement and our opportunities are going out to the market through open competition. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier that I showed you the project cycle. Now I'm showing you how our procurement fits within the project cycle. So we have, again, you see this country partnership strategy at the top, which is where we meet with the government to define the investment pipeline over the next several years. From the perspective of procurement, during project preparation stage, we then develop the plan for the procurement alongside the plan for the project. So the individual procurement packages and overall procurement plan, which is a very important document for firms like yourselves, because that will show you all of the opportunities that are coming in that project over the life of the project. So by looking at a procurement plan, you're immediately able to see, okay, 5 contracts for goods are coming up, 5 for works, 10 for services, whatever. There's going to be a hospital, there's going to be a procurement of medical equipment. So you can already start planning your business approach to that project if you want to bid for any of those packages, just by looking at the procurement plan. So that's arguably the most important document for you in this process as you try to identify business opportunities with ADB. Then, of course, each individual contract goes out through a bidding process, a bid evaluation, a contract award, and then each contract is implemented and closed. So that's relatively straightforward. But yeah, the key point really for you as trying to identify opportunities with ADB is the procurement plan and that early stage engagement. Because if you can come in early, build your team early, get your kind of dominant position early on, you have a much better chance of winning a contract than if you kind of come in once the tender is already live at bidding stage. Next slide, please. So we've mentioned our government partners. So, in terms of goods and works, but also much of our services, really it's the government that does the procurement, and ADB does the oversight and ensures that the government's procurement is fair. So what that means is that although the advertisements are also cross-posted on the ADB website, you can often identify a lot of these opportunities through ministry websites themselves. So Ministry of Health, say in Cambodia or in India, they would be posting their opportunities under ADB projects on their websites as well, and they would be involved in the evaluation and contract management and implementation processes. That said, ADB also procures itself, and we also sign contracts, namely for services. And so in that case, you're working directly with ADB and bidding directly for ADB. So there's a mix of both, but the majority in terms of dollar value of opportunities is going out through our borrowers. So most of the time you'd be working with a borrower, but with constant oversight and supervision from ADB to ensure that the process is fair, that you're treated fairly, that you're paid, etc. Next slide, please. So we have a variety of different options for how we procure for different types of standard bidding documents. Next slide, please. And different types of procurement methods. There's a long list here, which no need to get into, but just for your reference. But again, the default really is open bidding, and smaller packages may use request for quotations, for example, or direct contracting in some cases. Next slide, please. And then, this is all overseen by a strong anti-corruption unit and a strong anti-corruption policy. We have zero tolerance for fraud, corruption, collusion, obstructive practice, etc. Okay, so this ADB's opportunities are handled fairly and transparently, and you're always welcome to report any suspicion of an integrity violation to us, and we will investigate and may take appropriate action, such as sanctioning a firm for a period of time if they're found to have been undertaking corrupt practice. Next slide, please. So I'll just wrap up with a few slides on bidding strategies, or we can say how to really identify and win opportunities with ADB. And then I think we'll have some time for questions. So next slide, please. So look, I mean, you're all competent professionals. You work in firms where you have to win opportunities every day. So I'm sure most of these points are not new to you, but nonetheless, these are important points from the perspective of how to win with ADB. Okay, so obviously networking is key. Focusing on your performance, because past performance, often, you know, good performance will lead to more assignments in the future, especially as consulting. Under consulting services, we have a formal performance evaluation process. So unsatisfactory performance on an assignment will very likely mean that you are not invited to undertake further assignments, right? So that's a very important aspect. You know, express interest. Then you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So each procurement process is its own team, its own assessment, all treated individually. But just because you've tried 3 times and you failed 3 times, don't give up. Just keep trying. Everyone that looks relevant to your firm and that you think you could add value to us, express your interest, reach out, try and attend any of the early market engagement activities, and eventually this will pay dividends to you. You have to understand our context. You have to position yourself appropriately. You really have to read all of the procurement documents that are relevant to the bidding very closely, because sometimes the rules in each one of them are slightly different. And you're governed ultimately by that request for proposal. So you need to ensure that your proposal is in full compliance, else you stand the risk of being disqualified on a technical matter, which no one likes and no one wants. You know, as I mentioned earlier, engage partnership with more experienced firms. That's a good way in the door. And when in doubt, ask. You know, during a procurement process, there's always a channel with where you can submit questions. Do so, because then if you're unsure, you'll have a formal answer in writing to help guide you accordingly. Next slide, please. What not to do? You know, some common errors we see. When it comes to the registration of the firm or its JV partners, that you all need to be generally from an ADB member country. There are some cases where a selection allows universal procurement or eligibility from any country in the world, but for the most part, you need to be from an ADB member country, and your partners do as well, your JV partners. So we sometimes have to disqualify a partnership because one partner may be from, say, the United Arab Emirates or from an African state or one of these countries where, you know, they aren't an ADB member, and unfortunately then the whole consortium gets disqualified. You know, disclose any potential conflict of interest. Don't submit your proposal late. I mean, these are, you know, some of these are quite basic, but, you know, they still occur quite frequently. So, you know, do avoid them. Don't submit us a conditional bid where you sort of say, well, we can do this for you for 100,000, but X, Y, and Z conditions. You know, you either bid or you don't bid in terms of the requirements that were stated. Yeah, so these are just a few things to avoid and will help you ensure that you don't get disqualified on a technical matter. Next slide, please. If you do have a complaint or if you'd like a debriefing because you were unsuccessful, we do offer these, and they're very useful tools, especially the debriefings. Okay, so in terms of consulting assignments administered by ADB, you are always able to ask us for a debriefing, and we have to provide that to you if you were unsuccessful. And this is usually a 30-minute meeting where we discuss the strengths and weaknesses of your proposal. So this is a great way where if you bid and you weren't successful, you can find out why and learn from that, so that in future bids you can submit a stronger offer. Next slide, please. So we're kind of out of time, but just I wanted to take you a couple minutes and show you the website in terms of where to actually identify opportunities. I got a screen grab here, at least, that you can reference in the future. Obviously, you go to adb.org, then you can go to what we call Work With Us, which is a tab on the main website. You can even do that now if you have your browser open. And then you'll see a section of the page called the Business Center. And this is really the heart and soul of everything you need to know about how to do business with us. All of those circled pages there have the various frequently asked questions, guidance notes, links to the actual project materials that you can search. This projects and tenders page, for example, is very good. It's a very powerful search engine. It looks at every ADB project in the last at least a couple of decades since we've been putting records online. All of the tenders are there, both live and closed tenders. You can see who was awarded previous contracts. You can search by type of funding. You can search, there's a variety of search filters you can use. So that can really help you narrow in on the types of opportunities you want to pursue. Also, you can help you find documents, like I mentioned, the procurement plan for individual projects or the country partnership strategy for each country, where you can see the pipeline of lending plan for the next 5 years, that you can already start planning. Okay, in 2023, ADB plans to do a major health sector investment, say in Bangladesh. So I better start planning for that. How am I going to make sure that I'm in a good position to be ready for that when it comes in 3 years' time, right? So you can do some of that advanced planning, that advanced research by going through our website. There's really a lot on our website because we are a public sector organization. We're #1 in the Aid Transparency Index the last 2 years running. So really we disclose almost everything we do. We have a strong access to information policy. So it really is worth spending a lot of time on our website if you're interested to do business with us, because you will find 95% of what you seek there on the website, and the other 5% you can fill in through conversations with people like me or Dr. Banzon or the project teams that you are interested in working with, okay? So I can't emphasize enough, do take a look at our website, especially this business center, go through it. And also you can take a look at the health sector page, which will be under the Where We Work tab or the What We Do tab, one of those two. And you can see the specific health opportunities that Dr. Banzon was mentioning as well. So together you'll be able to have a better knowledge of how to move forward in your market planning and your business outreach planning, okay? Next slide, please. I think that's, oh yeah, register at CMS if you want to do consulting with us. This is at cms.adb.org. This is where all of ADB's consulting opportunities go out. And again, there are a lot of help guides and tools to help you navigate that website. Next slide, please. Yeah, so finally, these are the types of the documents that are relevant and useful for your business market intelligence work. I've mentioned the country partnership strategies. The business plans are essentially sub-documents of those strategies that are published every year that show the lending pipeline for the next, on a rolling basis for the next couple of years. But most importantly, really, are the procurement plans that list all planned contracts under a project, and then the actual notices to bid, right? The invitations to bid are very important, because that's how you actually formally get involved in a bidding process. And then once the bidding process is underway, don't think that you've missed the boat, right? You can also sometimes join in on a consortium at pre-qualification or shortlisting stage. You may be able to be added in as another partner into the team, for example. Or even after the fact, after a contract is awarded, often they'll need an extra subcontractor, for example, and you could be awarded that contract even after the main contract has been awarded. So all of that's available through the website, and you'll be able to identify that, which ones you may be interested in going for there. Next slide, please. Finally, look, COVID is changing everything about what we do and how we work. And we have a whole website that can take you through a bit more about our market research, our COVID specific business opportunities. You can search them on our consultant management system, but also through the website, you can search specifically for COVID opportunities. But you know, COVID is certainly changing the nature of our health opportunities, but you know, also, you know, our regular opportunities continue. I think that COVID is the only thing that ADB is doing these days. It's one of the things we're doing, and we have a lot of money going to support it. So if you're interested in COVID, we have this website here. You can take a look. You can get in touch with us, talk more about what your firm has to offer, and say in terms of ventilators or health supplies. and we'd be very interested to hear from you there as well. I think that's my last slide. It is, okay, perfect. So thanks very much, and happy to take your questions now. I hope that was useful.
Thank you very much, Julian. That was very helpful. Appreciate all the information that you shared in your presentation. It's exciting to know that while the portfolio of health is small right now, there is tremendous opportunity for growth. So look forward to seeing, what's available now, as well as so much more. So thank you for sharing that. I also appreciate the value that you shared in working with ADB. I think that's really good to know for people that are interested in just getting into the Asia Pacific Rim market. So as they explore what those opportunities are, they know that they're working with a strong partner, and they can, consider it to be a safe bet as they continue to grow and be able to take on some of those other ventures. So appreciate you sharing that. Great tips, and especially those subcontracting opportunities that may be available as well. So thank you. So we are now at the Q&A part of our webinar. We do have Mark O'Grady and Michael Mia with the U.S. Commercial Service ADB Liaison Office that is available with us, for us to be part of the Q&A session. And our presenters are also available to answer the questions as well. So any questions that you may have live at the moment, please submit them through the Q&A box. I do have a number of questions that we did receive from the audience who shared them upon registration. And so I will, get started with those as well. And speakers, you are free to ask questions as well. As I start with a question, I may point it to a particular, person to respond, and know that others are welcome to certainly chime in. So we want this to be a conversation as well. All right, so the first question I have is, what opportunities are there to expand physical therapy education and expose Asians who are unfamiliar with our industry? So let me, is Jeffrey Taylor here with us still? Wondering if you would be able to provide information on something that's specialized within the broad aspect of healthcare and where physical therapy education may fit into that.
Yeah, I'm still here, Saori. I've been enjoying the presentations. I think Dr. Dodo may be better placed to respond on therapeutics. I mean, certainly as part of an overall universal healthcare system, physical therapy is important. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Thank you. And I think, it's part of a much broader range where you're looking at preventative care, you're looking at therapeutics, you're looking at, in the case of COVID, PPE, and certainly there seems to be a physical impact to that disease, as with many, many others. But I'll pass over to Dr. Dodo for the specific role that physical therapy can play in a healthcare system.
Hi, thanks, Jeffrey. Now, okay. When we start talking, for example, of projects, right, which countries ask us for support. So the question is, are they asking us for support for expand rehab services or even physical therapy services, where education would then become an element? We're not seeing that at the moment. So it seems that in the region, this is not a perceived need, okay? Or they consider engaging or getting ADB to support them in different parts. The health system is quite broad in other parts, or in other areas like health financing or hospital care or more primary care. So at the moment, I am not aware of any project, I'm sorry, I have to step back a bit there. The only project that may have some element of physical therapy are the elderly care projects, but it's just an element. It's not even major parts. But if you're talking about specific physical therapy or project that has include physical therapy or rehab medicine, no, we don't have that. Now, how would you sort of try to get that, to make that happen? Well, one of the things we always say is that do a presentation, and we could help arrange that, because we see people talking to an audience, and hopefully we could get enough people within the bank to listen as a form of what benchmarking or getting the staff to hear new things that are happening. And of course, obviously, this is something new, not of course new in general, but new to the kind of projects that we're working on. That's one. Another, of course, is that you engage the countries directly, because if the countries are convinced, then they will come to us. So it's I think that's the way to do it. The one who's asking the question, or the group supporting physical therapy, should really sort of advocate, argue the case while countries should invest in PT, and then in a sense argue a second case why they should get ADB to support this type of interventions. Over.
Anyone else that would like to add to that? I have a question just to add on to what Dr. Banzon was sharing. If there is, someone that wants to engage with the country, as you mentioned as a suggestion, what would be the best approach to connect or engage with a particular company or country?
Go ahead. Okay. So there probably, I think there will be two ways, right? That I see if you talk about engaging countries. Sorry. One is the company basically talks to the, there will be, of course, within the countries, physical therapy programs or champions, right? Or you go directly to the Ministry of Health and reach out and find a way. Look, this is all outside of ADB. So this is advice to companies, so they can directly do that. Okay, and countries are open. Sometimes a cold call would work, right? And in the world of Zoom and online, it's not that difficult to arrange that. The second, of course, is you monitor this, how do we call it, conferences and seminars that are happening all over, right? And try to get yourself a speaking slot. I think that's all that I have, in the sense that a lot of countries actually monitor them, and that would also be a way to do it. So those would be the two ways. Then finally, if you get that, and power, if you have a champion within a country, that would also work a lot. Now PT in particular is something, they hire champions. There's a community of people, sort of experts, who have always argued that UHC includes rehabilitation, and which PT is all about, which physical therapy, sorry, that's what I call it, is all about. And so probably getting their voices much more organized would make the messages more coherent. Right now, I monitor these things. I don't hear the rehab people really making coherent, I'm not saying, okay, loud enough arguments. A number of countries there is, but it's not region-wide. Over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Banzon. Really appreciate you elaborating on that. The next question I have, for Julian, and just wondering if you could elaborate a little on add-on contracting opportunities and those procedures.
Sure, thanks. I mean, there's not really procedures such as it's more of a networking opportunity, right? I mean, it's who you who you know and how well you leverage yourself, okay? And you can do that at different stages of the process. So obviously at the beginning of prior to any procurement activity, your firm may be talking to other firms and making a team, and then you or your team or your JV go in on a invitation to tender or invitation for proposals that goes out, and that's the sort of standard way of bidding for work. But that your firm may have missed the boat on that, and that an invitation to tender may have gone out and you may not have seen it or weren't aware, but then you become aware of it shortly thereafter, for example, and you say, too bad, I really wanted to get in on that. Well, you still potentially can. You can monitor the ADB website, which will announce on the tenders page, it will announce once the shortlisted firms for consulting, and anyways, if it's a two-stage process, are released, and you can see that list of shortlisted firms, and then you can say, okay, I know that one, I'm going to give them a call and see if they're willing to add me into their team for the RFP stage. Because for consulting firms, anyways, you have essentially a two-stage. You have expressions of interest, and which is kind of like a pre-qualification, and then you have the full request for proposals. So generally you have, say, 20 firms may express interest, and then 5 or 6 are invited to actually submit a full proposal. So if one of those 5 or 6 or you have a network with, you could reach out to them, give them a call and say, hey, does your RFP, because the other thing is, some tender documents will allow the addition of that partner into the team at that stage. Other tender documents won't. There's a clear section of the bidding document that says shortlisted firms may associate with non-shortlisted firms, yes or no. And generally it says yes. Sometimes for whatever reason it may say no, but generally it says yes. So in most cases you should be able to reach out to a firm and say, if you know them, and say, hey, we missed this, can you come in? We can really add value on X, Y, or Z component of this assignment. And then you can negotiate it out, and hopefully they would let you in. Now, the other way to do so is, as I mentioned, after a contract is already awarded, then most contracts, be it goods, works, or services, have a clause about subcontracting and how subcontracting works. And generally, it's the case that if the employer, the client, whether that's ADB or the government, endorses the contractor to add a new subcontractor to their team, then this can be done. It's possible. Okay, so if you can convince the main contractor of the value of some proposition that you offer, often this is the case, for example, for technical surveys or studies that may need to be undertaken within a consulting assignment, or for a delivery or of a particular type of specialized works, or even surveys or this kind of technical work on a job site for goods or works as well. So if you can convince the contractor through your own networks and relationships to make that case to the client that, hey, client, I need this extra subcontractor on my team. Here's how it will affect the contract cost. Here's how it will affect implementation, arrangements, etc. And if the employer says, fine, go ahead, then you can bring them in. Generally speaking, no problems there. So there's those two real pathways. One is after a sort of pre-qualification stage in most procurement processes, where there is a sort of pre-qualification stage. If there isn't one, if it's just one stage, or if it's just a request for quotations process, for example, then there wouldn't be that opportunity, because anyone would, for example, in a request for quotations, the employer would just ask 3 firms for quotes and then take one quote that they're happy with. So there wouldn't be that kind of announcement of 5 shortlisted firms, for example. So you wouldn't be able to jump in at that stage, but you could still jump in at the post-contract award stage during implementation itself. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for going into detail about that. Really appreciate that. Okay. Next question. It's COVID-19 related, and I think a little bit of it was addressed during today's session. And you know, with this current pandemic, of course, there's challenges, but there's also opportunities. So this question is, what is the current situation with non-COVID related, you know, funding, and when can we expect projects to resume? And I wonder if Jeffrey Taylor would be able to take a stab at this question.
Sorry, Saori, could you just run that by? Could you just repeat the question, please?
Yes, absolutely. Non-COVID-19 related funding. And when can we expect projects to resume?
Okay, well, in many respects, the region has proved itself exceptionally resilient. We saw a slowdown for about 3 months in the traditional investment project portfolio, primarily because people weren't in the office, they didn't have resilient IT systems, and therefore couldn't actually work in the ways that they traditionally have. And also our clients at central government level were, and still are, primarily focused on the response to COVID mitigation measures. However, we have seen a significant uptick in the last 8 weeks to 12 weeks in the traditional project lending portfolio. Some of it getting repurposed for health, as the doctor has already said, Uzbekistan, for example. But we are seeing the investment portfolio after, you know, a dive, obviously, for about 3-4 months. We're seeing it pick up again, and we do expect to primarily meet our year-end targets in investment portfolio. We've slightly changed those targets, obviously, but I don't see it going down. I mean, the infrastructure needs remain there, and they remain critical, and in many ways have become more important to building resilient economies. So I don't see a big hit on the traditional investment side. The COVID-19 money is additional. It's not repurposed money. What we have is a certain amount of headroom that we can borrow from the financial markets and on lend. We brought some of that forward earlier. So we're going to maintain, we expect to maintain the investment, traditional investment portfolio based on historical levels. So I don't see there being a big reduction or any reduction in that respect.
Great, thank you. Great to hear. Appreciate that response. Okay, this next question is, I think, really tied to something more specialized around dental. So it'll be interesting to see to what extent Asian Development Bank has touched on that, as well as expansion to a certain country. So this question is, we currently offer on-site dental opportunities in UAE, United Arab Emirates, and looking to expand to Japan. Are there opportunities in other countries? And I'm thinking,
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any project that has dental. So, yeah, it's something that's needed. Dental care is something a lot of countries forget, despite the fact that it's quite important. But we're not seeing. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing any projects. I think my answer to the physical therapy would probably apply as well to dental. You know, the case have to be argued. And we could help facilitate that by probably having sort of a talk on dental. But yeah, it's really, if you look at it from project perspective, it's going to take some time. Countries have to be convinced that they need to invest in dental and borrow from ADB to finance those investments.
Yeah, that's helpful to know, and understanding that that might take some time. So an organization who is in this space, you know, maybe this is part of their longer term strategy, and they have the time to have those conversations and do that research and see where those opportunities may be. So thank you, yeah, very much for sharing with that and seeing how that ties into other aspects of specialized healthcare, including physical therapy. So thank you. Was that you?
If I could just chime in, I did want to
Absolutely.
I did want to mention a couple of things that Dr. Banzon, and we definitely have some of the most active members of the bank on the call today with Jeffrey, Julian, and Dr. Banzon that have been doing a lot to help ADB address long-term challenges that it has to face here in Asia. When it comes to things like physical therapy and the dental industry, if you think back at ADB's birth in 1966, its mission was to eradicate poverty. Today, that mission statement is much longer, has so many more deeper systemic issues that ADB has taken on one after another. So you can expect to see a lot more of that in the future. Dr. Banzon mentioned the silver tsunami, for lack of a better terminology, and the increase in elderly care that physical therapy is a part and parcel of. Indeed, when we look at ADB bank contracts, almost everything, I should say, is a component of a program that ADB has worked out with that nation. So it's the national governments that decide when physical therapy becomes a priority. So when their ADB funds the building of a hospital or care facilities in rural areas, the government itself decides what care will be provided at those facilities. So a lot of this is done selling directly to the countries. And indeed, the partners on the call today all help companies in doing that. For the dental industry, there are some recognized events like the Greater New York Dental Expo that occurs every year and receives a number of international delegations. These are the things that help drive the countries to prioritize, whether it be physical therapy for aging populations or dental and advanced I forget the terminology for advanced dental work. There are definitely opportunities that arise at the national level, but indeed, as Dr. Banzon said, if they're there, they're very small portions of a much bigger ADB healthcare effort.
Terrific. Very, very helpful in laying that out and kind of seeing where things fit together and what those approaches can be. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate that. Okay, so we are just a few minutes past time. I'm gonna ask one more question before we wrap it up and conclude. This one is about set-asides, and the question is: under class code qualification, NAICS in parentheses, are there any direct awards or set-asides? And Julian, I don't know if you would, have any thoughts or answer to that in regards to set-asides?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the U.S. government terminology. ADB has a direct contracting as a procurement option, and it's used. And there are a specific set of conditions that need to be satisfied in order to use it. So this may be natural continuation of previous work, emergency circumstances, very small value, continuity with existing. For example, if you have an existing, say, a set of machinery and you need to buy some parts that are specialized for that machinery, you can use direct contracting as a rationale that you have to buy this particular type of part or what have you. So these are essentially the set of conditions by which we can use direct contracting. We also have a modality called limited bidding, where a limited number of firms from the market are invited to bid. And this may be because the market itself is small, because generally if it's a limited bid, we would invite all relevant players in the market to bid. So say it's a very specialized piece of IT equipment or something, and there are only 5 suppliers in the world that manufacture this piece of equipment, then you could do a limited bid and just invite those 5 manufacturers to bid. So that's the way that we use these types of less or non-competitive procurement modalities within ADB financed projects. But generally, yeah, the majority of our procurement is going through open competitive bidding, and that may be advertised either nationally or internationally. So firms and the questioner can be sort of comforted by the fact that there are plenty of opportunities going out openly to the market. But there are also some that, especially small value or specialized urgent assignments that do go through direct contracting. And in particular, it may be the case, for example, what we're trying to do more in the Pacific, because the market interest in the Pacific, for example, is quite narrow. We're trying to push more towards a model where, if we engage one consulting firm to undertake the project preparation and feasibility study design, that firm has a very strong chance of being selected to continue into the detailed design and project implementation for that project if they do a good job. So there's kind of an element of direct award there if through an initial competitive process followed by good performance, it can lead to further work. And many of our contracts, be it goods, works, or consulting, are subject to variations that may increase their value and extend their time. So you may start with a $100,000 assignment, but that may grow for 2 years, but that may grow, for example, to $200,000 and 3 years because of a change in employer's need or a change in scope. But there's also opportunities to expand your scope of work, also by being proactive and working, within your TOR, but identifying new opportunities. It can often be justified as more efficient from the employer's perspective to just process a variation to that contract to add, again, say another 50% of the contract value or thereabouts, rather than undertaking a whole new procurement process. Now that's subject to some scrutiny, as you would hope and expect, but nonetheless, it's a way that we can improve and continue our engagement with firms on contracts that are going well. Thank you.
If I may, just on the issue of set-asides, Jeff here again. ADB's charter provides that its financing is used within the ADB membership. Set-asides, in a general sense, are focused on domestic issues and disadvantaged groups within a domestic environment. ADB finds it problematic or does not generally agree to set-asides in its operations because its overall duty and obligation to open up the competition and procurement to all of its members on a fair and equal basis. So we don't see set-asides in our operations.
And if I could just add in, Julian hit the nail on the head when he first said not familiar with what the term is. ADB I always say I learned foreign languages to work overseas. What you need is to learn the bureaucracy, and I'm a bureaucrat and I'm very proud of that, and to understand the dynamics. But if you look at the ADB's contracting pages, you will see that many of their contracts are set aside for individuals. So a lot of times when we use the term set aside, we're talking about smaller disadvantaged business utilization in the United States. Indeed, ADB is, part and parcel of everything that ADB does is trying to work with small and medium-sized contractors. So you'll find that many of the contracts are set aside for individuals, which would be about the smallest of a company you can get. Again, I should also point out that large companies can also, their employees can bid as individuals for these times as things too, but most of these things are set aside, and indeed sometimes they're often set aside for national companies as well. So Julian's comments about add-ons is going to have a very profound impact there, where these projects may be set aside for an Indian company or a Bangladeshi company, but they may need to partner to provide an effective EOI or bid to the bank, and therefore that's where U.S. contractors can also play a role.
Okay, terrific, great explanation, and yeah, appreciate the response, and I hope it's very helpful, for the people that ask such great questions. So good clarification. So that concludes the questions, for this evening. And I just really would, again, like to thank the hosts who came together to be able to put the series on. So, thank you very much, to Go-Biz, U.S. Commercial Service, Asian Development Bank, and the CalAsian Chamber of Commerce, Sacramento MBDA Export Center. Really appreciate these presentations. Truly learned a lot along the way as well, and have a lot of gratitude for Asian Development Bank and all that this organization does to make a difference in people's lives, throughout the world. And healthcare is so important to impacting people's lives and creating livable communities, and appreciate the information that was shared. Thank you so much for your time, Jeffrey Taylor, Eduardo, Dr. Eduardo Banzon, and Julian. Doczi, great presentation, terrific information. And for the audience, thank you for your questions. Just a reminder, survey will be going out, and we do welcome your feedback. And as we work on complex matters like healthcare and other topics, as was shared earlier, collaboration is important, cross-sector collaboration, and it's been an honor to collaborate with you, and look forward to more opportunities where we can come together around the world to create opportunities for businesses. So thank you so much. I just hope that wherever you are in the world, so those of you in Asia, I hope you have a wonderful day. Those of us in the United States, have a wonderful evening. And for wherever you are, please take care of yourself, stay safe, and thank you again for joining us. Much appreciated. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.